With that, we shall begin with our first speaker, Aashish Sharma. Aashish Sharma is the topic which we will be talking today is on managing Kubernetes cluster and deploy Portainer. And Aashish Sharma basically is a technology consultant who survived few years of tortures and found that very late that IT industry is not a perfect job. He has worked as managed service consultant as well as a technical pre-sale consultant with multiple product vendors, currently trying to make people believe that I know Kubernetes. Well, he's based out of Sydney and working for a banking software provider at the moment. Over to you, Aashish.
Thanks, Abhita. You guys can hear me okay?
Yes, Aashish, we can hear you.
Okay, I'll start sharing my screen and then we dive deep into it. So I'll start with, can you guys see my screen? I'm on the slides now.
Yes, they are coming up.
Okay, so I also have with me Neil, who is the co-founder of Portainer. He has helped me with the slides and I asked him to join so that he can help out with some questions live on YouTube. So I have few slides and after the slides, we'll directly go into a demo where I'll show how we can use Portainer to manage Kubernetes or Docker clusters. And starting with this picture where we see the bare black screen where we have all those commands and it's difficult to manage Kubernetes. You need to have some level of expertise if you're trying to play out or if you want to start managing your clusters from command line. And going back to why I'm interested in Portainer and how I got to know this, when I was working on multiple Kubernetes clusters and with different teams scattered globally, and they want to see the logs for my clusters. They want to have access to my configuration files. It was a little bit difficult managing using Azure. Some of my team members didn't have Azure access as well. So I found about Portainer. Portainer is a solution which can simplify managing a Kubernetes cluster. You can create users and give them role-based access. They can access your configuration files and see your logs and all those things exposed through external load balancer. So basically it was very easy for me to work with 5 different teams across 2 different time zones, working on the same cluster, looking at same configuration files. The idea is that it is a platform which helps manage, secure, and monitor your Kubernetes clusters. Portainer runs as a container. It's very straightforward. You just deploy it on Docker. So only thing you need is a Docker container and you can deploy Portainer on Docker container. Now, what is exciting about the code base? So it is a very, very small footprint. Now, I know there are other software such as you can use Docker Desktop to manage your Docker containers. But then if someone wants to have a look at your log files, you'll have to probably get the log files every time and send them over an email or share multiple files. And that is the pain which Portainer took away in my project. And I started exploring it. So it's a very small footprint of 15 MB. You just deploy this extremely secure because the attack surface is very, very small. And it takes care of the risks if you have in terms of external dependencies. And you can manage thousands of clusters. So we will see a few of the clusters which I have deployed. And I have two demos to show you in this session. On the Portainer architecture, this is how Portainer architecture looks. So I will probably use a laser pointer and give me a second. So we have our Portainer front end, which is written in AngularJS, and this runs in your browser. So you just have to access it using your external load balancer IP address. And this browser talks to Portainer backend, which is written in Golang. and this runs as a container. Now, all these nodes, node manager talks to all these nodes, and if you want to join or monitor more clusters, you can use a Portainer agent. So you have to deploy a Portainer manager, and then Portainer manager can talk to multiple agents. This is how the security is also managed, because the Portainer frontend has got no direct access to the Portainer agents. Now, Portainer also has got an edge agent, which is primarily when we don't have high-speed internet connections and we still want to manage something on the edge nodes, where Portainer edge agent is very, very helpful. Moving on to next slide is
Aashish,
what we can.
I'll just stop you for a moment. If you can just do your slides in the presentation mode full screen, that should be good.
Okay, sorry. I think, okay, I have two screens, and that's how I think I'm probably on a wrong screen. So let me change the presentation mode. Okay, is this good now?
Yes, Aashish, sounds good.
Okay, good. Sorry. So what we can manage with Portainer? So we can manage Kubernetes clusters, we can manage Docker, we can manage edge computing nodes, and serverless as well. And we can deploy Portainer on-prem, or we can deploy on any cloud. We can deploy it primarily major cloud platforms, and it supports ARM, x86, and PowerPC based architectures. So I think that's where we can deploy. Next is we have certain functionality in Portainer, so it is categorized into these 7 categories. So we have container management. You can manage your registries. You can manage multiple clusters. Identity and access management, which provides you with the role-based access control, and that's one of the most loved features for me. You can manage your storage. It also gives you monitoring and alerting. You can manage how much CPU it's consuming. You can use performance monitoring in there, and network management. So I think that's something which is covered under the Portainer Business Edition, which is you'll have to probably have some additional licenses to run Business Edition. But to point out, Portainer is open source software. All the source code is available on GitHub, so you can start using it as soon as you go GitHub and deploy it in a Docker container. Portainer security. So how security is managed? One, you can use external user directory, LDAP or OAuth, to manage your authentication. Other Portainer also runs with Azure Ready service account. So you'll have to have a service account or creation of service principal access, and then you can run Portainer using that Azure AD service account. As I was pointing out earlier, you don't have direct access to the environments. All things happen through the Portainer backend. You start with the front end, which is accessible through browser, and you go to the backend, and then the backend communicates back with your environments. That's how we don't have a direct access to those environments in terms of security, and everything is flowing through TLS connections. So it is completely secure to access. Coming next to a few of the roadmaps, what Portainer is doing in terms of more support on core platform, security, monitoring, and edge computing. So this is the roadmap. There is an elaborate blog which Portainer has written on their website about new features coming in Portainer 2.0. I have the link to the blog in my slides. I will quickly rush through a few more slides. These are just the graphical user interface of Portainer, and then we'll dive into the demo. Anyone has any questions, feel free to type your questions on YouTube. And Neil, who is the co-founder of Portainer, will be answering your questions on YouTube. This is how Portainer interface looks like. You have the dashboard from where you can access your application templates, stacks, containers, services, networks. It's very easy to use, simple, straightforward. Deploying will take less than 15 minutes. You can see all the clusters which you're managing on the home page, diving down into the container management. So you can start, stop, kill, restart, recreate a container just using this simple graphical user tool. Multi-cluster management. It supports up to 25,000 clusters and also supports pagination. Application templates. Application templates are pre-configured, ready to deploy. Just click on that particular template and you can deploy the template. It's like a small repository from where you can deploy your applications. And the good thing is you can also create your custom templates. Now using role-based access control, you can give access to your users to deploy those templates. So basically, administrator can create these templates and your users can deploy those templates depending upon the role-based access control. You can control ownership to the resources, which resources a particular group, like you may have DevOps teams, you may have developers, you may have somebody in testing area, and you don't want everyone to have access to everything. That's where it shines on the role-based access control. You can create different teams and give access depending upon what a particular team needs to see. This slide talks about or gives you a little bit of overview of role-based access control. Now I'm about to end my slides. This is just a Portainer agent. Portainer agent connects to your clusters. So we'll see that in the demo. We have edge computing. You can create group of edge clusters and centrally deploy applications across those edge clusters. So I have few links on the last slide, which I will share with you, and you can have a look, read about Portainer. There is a very good link from Sydney University. They have been using Portainer and they have this link. It's fortunately open, a wiki link. It talks about how to manage your way through Portainer. And also we have a lot of documentation on portainer.io, where you can go and download or see the documentation. Now I will go to my demo. I assume you can see my screen. I'm already logged into demo.portainer.io. Sabita, is it visible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. So we have the dashboard here. I'll quickly go to app templates and we will try to deploy iron
Before we
functions.
start with the demo, in case if you have any question, please feel free to post your questions down there. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we'll use this iron function. So I'll say if func. So we'll deploy the stack. This is just deployment. We can see that it is already deployed. Now we'll see what are the services here. It has created some services. This is still not done, and it has exposed that services on this particular port. We go to containers. We can see the container here. You can start, stop, kill, resume, or pause the container. You'll have all the configuration for a container. What are the details? A few other paths which we have already set up. Labels associated with this container. What is the particular network here, which you can see. And then we have image registry. We can manage image registries from this page. We can also add a Docker or a query registry if you want to manage a query registry from this. And then we can have a look at what all networks we have. We can also manage the volumes from here. So this is something where if you want to add a volume, you can add NFS volume, CFS volume, and provide the address and add it. You can add an endpoint, which I'll probably show here. If you go to add endpoint,
Ashish, I think you're sharing the wrong window right now. Can you check once? You're not sharing this demo window.
Okay, let me go back to my screen. Give me a second. Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me go back to the home page once again. So this is the home page where we land. And one of the good things is that if you access this URL demo.portainer.io, the username and password are already on GitHub. This is the home page where you will see you have a demo environment if you want to try it out without deploying anything. So I'll quickly repeat a few of the steps. So the dashboard tells me that this is a local cluster I'm managing. There is no container as such. But I'll quickly go to the app templates and I will deploy, say, this iron function. So if I go here, I'll do iffunc or ifstack and I'll deploy the stack. So it'll take a little bit of time. So I think it's already done. You can see this is deployed. I'll quickly go and deploy cockroach DB agent. So cdb, deploy the stack. So we have multiple templates already built in here. So if we see toggle this add container templates, you can see we have Nginx, HTTPD, container registry, MySQL, PostgreSQL, MongoDB. All these are just click and deploy. So all these container images are already there for you to deploy. We also have Redis. I know we are going to talk about Redis today, but we also have it here. And this is about the app templates. And you can create your own app templates and give access to your team members based on the role-based access control. It has got support for Docker stacks as well. I'll go to the services. So we created a cockroach DB container. So we have this CDB deployment here. We can change the replicas. So if I did 2 and apply changes, you can essentially do this from here. Coming back to containers, you can see you have 4 containers here. One of them is stopped for certain reason. There is I function and the cockroach DB. You go into the container. One of the things is you can see all the container details, all the labels, environment details, network details on this page. And if we go back to images, which is my next tab, you'll see that you can manage your Docker images. You can actually manage Docker registry, query registry from Portainer. And that's about managing the images. Then we have networks. You can see the networking details, whatever we have deployed. So in this case, this I function, the network details are here. I think it'll take a little bit of time to refresh the page. And then we also have volumes and configs. So this is the brief overview, but if you want to deploy Portainer to manage a particular instance, okay, one of the things with this one is that after every 15 minutes, there is a reset on this demo environment. So if you have done any changes on this, you'll have to vary that after 15 minutes, your changes will be lost. So I think it's probably a reset which they have done. So I'll have to go back here again. One of the other things which I wanted to show is deploying Portainer to manage clusters, AKS clusters, which are there on Azure. So I will quickly go down there. So I have my AKS cluster running here. I'll quickly start the shell and we'll deploy a Portainer container, and then we'll monitor that using external load balancer and the IP address. So That's my local cluster. I'll probably quickly deploy here a few more things. For example, I'll deploy a WordPress, my website, deploy. So this is just the brief overview of Portainer 1.24, and I will now go deep down into managing AKS clusters, a separate environment which I have on my Azure subscription. So I think this completes almost everything we have here. It's just the registries which I wanted to show you: query registry, ACR, GitLab, and a custom registry, which you can add here. Quickly on the users, you can create a user. So if I create demo, and then you have demo 123, demo 123, and whether it's a administrator user or a not administrator user, you can toggle this. You can create user. So we have this user, but it's not an administrator user. So if I log in with this user, he'll not be able to see anything. Now I will quickly go back to my Azure shell. You guys can see my Azure shell.
Yes, Aashish. If you can just zoom in a little bit, that should be good.
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
So I have 2 Kubernetes clusters deployed on Azure AKS. So there are 2. One is web cluster, and then there's application cluster. So we'll quickly go and deploy Portainer. So you can see I have this Portainer YAML, which I can quickly get, and it will take us less than 10 minutes to complete everything, and we'll be good to monitor our Kubernetes clusters deployed on Azure. I think it will take around 1 to 2 minutes to provision external load balancer, which we need to access. So during that time, I'll go back again to the demo.portainer.io website to explore a few more things. We'll come back here in a minute. So this is a demo site which anyone can use. Now I'll go back to templates, and let's deploy a Cockroach DB instance. You can enable or control access, that whether administrators should be able to manage this particular resource, or you want to restrict the access, and then you can choose a particular user. For example, in this case, we have the demo user, and then we'll say this is our CDB. You can choose a category. We have serverless, databases, monitoring, and log management templates. But in this case, we are deploying this Cockroach DB. So the stack is deployed. So I have a WordPress, I have my Cockroach DB, and I will quickly go back to our container deployment. It is the external IP address is still pending, and it will talk on port 9000. One of the things to note here is that you'll have to open this port 9000 on your cloud platform. So in the network security groups, you'll have to have allow inbound on port 9000. I think maximum it will take is 2 minutes to provision. We are just short of 2 minutes. I'll come back on this screen once we have the external load balancer, and then we see that one here. We have extensions. So these are primarily role-based access control, which we saw, external authentication for Azure AD or Active Directory. Then we have registry manager to manage registries, and these are licensed components, not part of the open source Portainer community edition. I'm just flipping between these screens to see. I have my external IP address. So if I go here, I'll just copy this. So this demo.portainer.io is hosted by Portainer team, and they have given you this access to check these things. Now, the current deployment which I did on my Azure subscription, we'll access this using this external load balancer IP. And on the first prompt, it will ask you to create a username and password. So I'll set something very complex, which all of you will know, admin123. And I'll say create.
Like, just to stop a moment, I mean, there's a question from the audience that is Portainer open source?
Yes, Portainer is open source, hosted on GitHub. All the source code, you can see that. So we have our Kubernetes cluster on which we have deployed the Portainer node. So this is where my Portainer is running. This is a AKS Kubernetes cluster. So we'll have to check manage the local Kubernetes environment, and I'll say connect. Okay, allow users to use external load balancer. That's right, and we want to manage all these storage configurations or storage. And here is my cluster. So I'll just go and say I'll just rename it to my web cluster, and I'll update the endpoint. So this is my web cluster. So in my web cluster, I can see I have one of the good things I like is if I go to applications, this is my web application. I'll go to console, and we have bash, which I like, connect, and you're connected to your container. You're already inside your container. You don't have to type that long command and check the name of the container and copy paste every time. So I think this is again very, very good for me. If you share this external IP address and port and create a user, I can distribute it to my team members. They will be able to access it. One of the other things is to see the logs, which again, I'm very fan of. You go to your log, auto refresh, and you can see all the logs. It's again very easy. My teammates, irrespective of whether they're working out of India, US, I can share this username, password, and they can look at my environment and tell me that this is something which I'm not doing wrong, the configuration is wrong, or something like that. So here we have our secrets, configurations, volumes, everything configured. So I have a Portainer agent up and running, looking after my AKS cluster. Now I quickly want to add Portainer agent and monitor one more cluster. So I think that's what I will quickly do, and that will conclude my session in another 5 minutes. So I will go back to my Azure shell, and I will deploy the Portainer agent. Sorry, I'll have to go into a particular directory to get this done. So it is deploying the Portainer agent on my second cluster, which is my application cluster. And so once it is provisioned, we will be able to add that particular cluster. So if I go to endpoints, add endpoints, you can see these commands here. So essentially, this is the same command which I'm using to add a second cluster, which is my application cluster. So we'll have to wait for external load balancer to provision. So I'll quickly check this. This is pending, so I think that's another 1 or 2 minutes. I'll quickly go back to my Portainer. So here again, it is the same configuration, but this particular installation is the beta installation. So I'm using the Kubernetes K8 beta Portainer rather than the one which is the stable release 1.4. So you can see the functionality is a little bit different, but support for this one is in beta, and beta has actually came out as a release candidate. So it's no longer a beta. I think very soon they will release this because it has moved out of beta and now release candidate. So this particular application will be used to manage Kubernetes. Okay, so we have the external IP address here, and the agents will listen on 9001. So I'll go to my endpoints, add an endpoint, say this is my app cluster colon 9001, and we'll add the endpoint. And we'll just click these toggles, and I have my app cluster monitored from Portainer. So again, it's the same functionality, but how easy it is to manage your clusters, to deploy this on multiple clusters. And obviously, we can script all those things so that I don't have to go and do it on every node. So I think that concludes my demo. Just to summarize everything once again, we have Portainer, which runs as a container on a Docker. If you have Docker installed, you can easily do that. You can deploy Portainer either on Docker container running on your laptop and then deploy the agent on your clusters. While the other method is what we have used. I have deployed my Portainer master on my web cluster, and I have deployed an agent on my app cluster. So I have these two clusters monitored through Portainer, deployed on Azure Kubernetes Service, AKS. If you have any more questions, feel free to ping on YouTube. You can connect with me and Neil on LinkedIn. Thank you very much. That concludes my session. Thanks, Sabita. Thanks, Ajeet.